Histories has posted a reward of 300 million oolongs.
Shucks howdy, partners. How y'all doing? Welcome to the Bomb Squad podcast. I am your host, Tim M. Sullivan, and with me I have...
I'm Austin Sweebleman.
I'm Rein Conversey.
I'm Ethan Hawker, last I checked.
And today we have not one, but two special guests, including three-time all-time champion.
I'm Ed Johnston.
And a new guest to the podcast.
Hey guys, I'm Joe Johnston. I also go by Joe Showstrand because there's 43 of me on IMDb. And yeah, I'm a longtime associate and watcher of the show. I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. Happy to have both of you on here. This is going to be a fun cast. Today we are talking about the 2001 film Cowboy Bebop the movie, aka Cowboy Bebop Knocking on Heaven's Door. Before we kind of get into feelings on the movie, I want to just talk a bit about the lead director, Shinichirō Watanabe, because it's probably going to be my only chance to really go in depth on him in the podcast, because he doesn't really direct a lot of movies. He's mainly a TV guy. Shinichirō Watanabe, he created the Cowboy Bebop series, and he was the lead director in the movie. He's created a couple other shows, including Samurai Champloo, Kids on the Slope, Space Dandy, Terror in Resonance, Carol and Tuesday. And he also directed some episodes on a couple other shows, including Escaflowne, Gundam 0083, and Ethan's on here, so he'll be very happy for me to mention that he co-directed Macross Plus.
Yes.
He also has directed some shorts that were in anthology films. He directed two of these shorts in Animatrix. He directed Detective Story and Kid Story. And he also directed a short in the Genius Party film. He directed Baby Blue. He directed a short film that was concurrent with Blade Runner 2049. He directed an animated short called Blade Runner Blackout 2022. And he's also producing the Black Lotus series that's about to come out. He's also done a lot of music production on various animes. He music produced on Mind Game, the Masaki Yuasa film, Michiko and Hachin, the Lupin the Third series, the one called Fujikomine. He's got a big body of work. He's worked on a lot of really great shows, and he's worked on a lot of music-oriented stuff, and he's made it clear that he's a music-oriented director, which I think makes his work really interesting to engage with. Rein has a question. Yes, Rein.
No, I have a statement. You're forgetting the episodes. He also directed all the episodes with Fred Fredberger on Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. I'm ashamed you forgot to mention that.
You're right. I'm so sorry.
It's his best work.
Why would Tanner do this specifically? Why would he put you up to say this incredibly something thing?
Yeah.
I'm blaming Tanner for this.
So yeah, now that kind of talked a bit about the director, who I feel like he's a known name in like the anime series world, but maybe not in the anime film world, but he's worked on some very influential stuff, so I just wanted to kind of shout him out a little bit. But now that I've finished talking about him, 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Let's talk about our history with Cowboy Bebop. This is a show it's very big with anime fans, particularly anime fans in the West. It's a very big like starter anime series. Like I remember at one point head of FTVP at Webster, Aaron Abishan, he was like coming to me and asking for anime recommendations. And he was just like, I started watching Cowboy Bebop. It's pretty cool. It's a show that it has a very broad appeal. I think it's interesting to kind of see where people started with it. So Austin, why don't you give us your journey?
I've never seen this man before in my life. Cowboy Bebop premiered on Adult Swim, I think September 2nd, 2001, otherwise known as, I think, the day after the movie premiered in Japan. Mm-hmm. I've been seeing commercials for it my entire life, and I had a couple points where I just went back and I tried to watch the first couple episodes, and something about the pacing was off, or it just felt like the first few episodes weren't connected enough to like a bigger premise, so I always bailed at the last second. But I have lots of hot friends who like Cowboy Bebop, you know? there's that joke that Cowboy Bebop is the anime for people who don't like anime. But until yesterday, when I watched this movie, Cowboy Bebop to me was just see a space cowboy and that clip of Vine on YouTube where he's eating the psychedelic mushrooms.
That's fair. I would say, as far as like getting into the show, I think episode 5 is where it really picks up. That's where it really takes off. So if you really want to get into it, just give it till episode 5.
Hey, which one was episode 5 again?
That is Ballad of Fallen Angels. That's where they introduce Vicious. So yeah, Rein, why don't you give us your thoughts on your origin story with Cowboy Bebop?
All right, it's quite the tale. Just copy paste Austin's answer onto me. You basically have it. I've known it exists forever. It's been on my watch list forever. All my anime friends say it's great. All my friends who don't like anime say it's great. It just hasn't happened yet. Just haven't had the chance to. I know it's not like that long. I think it might have been on a few times on Tsunami when I was a kid, and I probably just didn't watch it because it didn't have big lasers or people summoning frogs. It's like, well, what's the point? I don't know. Yeah, I am interested, especially to see like why what it is about exactly that makes it appeal so much to non-anime fans in particular. I assume it probably doesn't have a lot of the elements that drives like casual audiences away from anime.
Alrighty, that's fair. Ethan, why don't you give us your origin story?
So this is going to be one of those times where I'm not like super like I've watched the series. I watched it back when I was in middle school, and I never really revisited after that. It's a show I remember liking quite a bit. I think I watched it on streaming, but I only like half paid attention to a lot of it. I admit. I like Watanabe's work. I've seen Space Dandy, and of course Macross Plus, another collaboration with Yoko Kanno. That's really, really good. But no, I've never absolutely loved Bebop. I've always had Lupin in my heart to fill that sort of dynamic. I should revisit Cowboy Bebop properly. I wanted to do it for this, but I did not because I'm poor at time management. But I had a really fun time visiting because I've never seen this film in particular. I never saw Knocking on Heaven's Door, and I had a good time with it, despite a few minor issues, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Ed.
So, growing up, there are two anime, the gateway animes for black kids. One is Dragon Ball Z, and the second one is Cowboy Bebop. Because Cowboy Bebop has to be the blackest anime like ever. The jazz music, the kung fu, it emulates kung fu movies, which is really huge in the black community. We loved Bruce Lee. So with Spike coming in there, fighting like Bruce Lee to jazz music, like you can't get a blacker anime. So I grew up watching it. I think the first episode I watched was like the one that introduced Faye Valentine, the one where she's at the convenience store, I think. Oh, and the first thing that caught me, that hooked me in, or that kind of reeled me in, I was like, damn, them some short shorts. So I was like, what's this all about? But then like I get introduced to this, and it was really fun. It was really, it's a really Faye heavy episode anyway too. So I was like, who are these other characters? I need to find out. It actually took me years to go back and watch the first 3 episodes. Because I believe it's episode 4 or episode 3. I can't remember. I didn't watch the first couple of episodes for a while because I was watching on Toonami, and it's very sporadic. But I was so religious about it. I loved it. I still love it to this day. It's my jam.
Awesome. All right, Joe.
So I really heard about Bebop back when I was a kid. Like I always kind of knew about it, and I've always like on Cartoon Network. I think the first time I ever like saw like frames of it was like I was watching Samurai Jack one night, and then it literally cut to like the Real Folk Blues, and I was like, wait, what the is this? And this like Adult Swim came on, and I was like, whoa, this looks really cool. And then I just kind of forgot about it for like 10 years, and I think I was like talking with some of my older cousins because they were like super into it, and they kind of like recommended it to me, and I was like really into DBZ and Naruto and stuff, so I was like, well, I want to watch more critically acclaimed things. So there was one time I think my family was taking like a driving trip to Florida, and I just remember binging the entire series just on that trip, and it was like, holy shit, this series is amazing. It hit at like a really, really the right time in my life. I'd always kind of gotten into anime through things like the Animatrix, and which I think Tim mentioned earlier. I think Shinichirō Watanabe directed some stuff on that.
Yeah.
And I think Interstellar 555, I just bought the Daft Punk Discovery album, and I think just the combination of those two really made this show hit, and it was fantastic. And it got me into a lot of other anime, like kind of the more typical stuff like FMA, Death Note, Attack on Titan. But I just kind of value this show over all of them just because it's like really cool, and I just love how kind of cinema-esque this series feels compared to a lot of other anime. Because like I noticed that like with a lot of contemporary stuff, they kind of try to emulate the manga, where this it's like I feel like there's cinematography that's almost kind of like very classical sort of compared to like the modern stuff. So yeah, I love Bebop. I've always loved Bebop, and I always will love Bebop.
Awesome. And I'm interested that like out of the actual like Bomb Squad people, I'm the only one who like has a deep history with it. So I think it's interesting that we get into like kind of a mix of perspectives on this podcast. It was one of those things for me where it was a show that I'd heard about for a while as a kid, but since I didn't have cable until like 2007, I wasn't really able to watch it unless I was at someone else's house. But I remember the first night I watched it at my sister's house. I remember the three things that I watched that night. It started with the Adult Swim pilot Korgoth of Barbaria, which is just this hyper violent, like primal type thing. It's so good, but I guess they didn't pick it up as a series because it was too expensive to make. And I watched that, and then the first episode of Bebop I watched came on, which was Brain Scratch, which is a really weird episode that deals with like theological and like it deals with some weird stuff that like 13-year-old me was not ready for. And so that was just like, it was one of those experiences that I think is crucial to any young anime fan's life, is that you need to watch something that traumatizes you just a little bit. For a lot of people of a certain age, it was tuning into the Sci-Fi Channel and watching Akira. For me, it was Brain Scratch. And then the thing that came on right after that was a show that I had not heard of before called Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh no.
Or as I thought it was pronounced, Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Dear God.
Yeah, the episode of that they played was Weaving a Story 2, which was like this episode where Shinji gets eaten by the Eva, and they have to like save him, and there's this sequence of all of the female characters coming at him topless. Like, what the am I watching right now?
Oh no.
That was just such a mind-blowing night for me. I was not ready for the things that I witnessed.
I think that's the beauty of anime, though. It's just how everything is so original and just like creative.
Yeah. I think that it opened my mind to different kinds of content. It was definitely something that made me more interested in watching more of that, and also watching more of Evangelion. So as soon as we got cable, they didn't have Eva on at the time, but Cowboy Bebop was just like going right on the DVR. So I started watching from wherever they were at that particular time. I want to say it was like close to whenever they did the like Pierrot the Foe episode where they're fighting the like child man. But yeah, I've watched through all of that, watched it on DVD and Blu-ray several times, and it was a big show for me as a young up-and-coming anime fan, and it's like that for a lot of people. So I think it's always an interesting one to kind of see people's histories with. So now that we've kind of talked about that, let's talk about the movie. Because it's an interesting movie. What'd you guys kind of think of it? Austin, we'll start with you.
They really nailed the aspect of making this accessible to people who haven't seen the series. I was really worried that it was going to be like somebody showing their grandma The Matrix Revolutions, except I'm the grandma in this scenario. Fortunately, you pick up really quick on what the deal is. I can't help but personally compare Knockin' on Heaven's Door to Serenity, the Firefly movie, because they're both this sort of movie about a massive corporation that does something unspeakable, and they're trying to cover it up in spite of what the protagonists are up to. Because this is a really, really narrow genre, space westerns. The animation, voice acting, especially the music, is quite good. I think if you were like, this movie's distinctive personality is sort of like this teenage charm where it tries to tackle philosophical concepts while not veering off, the sci-fi road into fantasy land. Say, if you erase someone's past and they can see dreamlike things in reality that no one else can, have you created the conditions where reality itself is a dream they can't wake from? I thought the butterflies were cool. And this movie, like the show for me, kind of suffered from like pacing issues. The middle drags a little, the falling action ends too soon, but it's cool as hell, and I'd actually be comfortable showing this to people who don't like anime. It's a good movie.
Awesome. Rein, tell us your thoughts.
Oh boy, I can't wait to be the big bad of this episode.
No.
I did like the movie. It's a good movie. Maybe it's just the mood I was in that day, but alright, how should I put this? Animation, spectacular. The characters, very charming and likable. And like Austin said, does a fantastic job. Because from what I understand, this takes place like in the middle of the series or near the end of the series. So the fact that you're able to
basically,
explain.
It's like 22 and 23.
I don't know if this has ever been made like official, but the general consensus is that it's set between episodes 22 and 23.
This occurs sometime in between, I think, episodes 21 and 22 or 22 and 23.
So it's like towards the end.
That's what I heard went with my light research. Like, it does a pretty solid job as just like a standalone adventure for someone who with no experience of the series. I just gotta say, as fun as these characters were to follow around and as amazing as this world was to step inside and look at, it was just too simple of a standalone story. Like, it was just too straightforward. Just like there just wasn't enough meat on it for me to really be invested, and it almost felt like they were trying so hard to make it a standalone thing that can work without context of the show that there just wasn't enough there to build on, if that makes sense. I don't even know if it makes sense to me.
No, I get you.
I don't know, the vibe I got from a lot of people, because like I felt like a war criminal giving it a 3 stars when everyone else was giving it like 4.5 stars on Letterboxd. But a consensus I saw is a lot of people, and this was from people who saw the series before, they saw this as like one big last hurrah before, like, from what I understand, a kind of melancholy ending to the series. So I think maybe there's just that context of how the story ends for these characters that's kind of missing for me to fully appreciate it. But yeah, I gotta say, I love the spectacle. I really, really appreciate just how like low tech this sci-fi world is. Like how like the convenience, it's like any sort of convenience store, you'll find like in a downtown area. I think that's cool. And then little bits of culture that we get in each of the neighborhoods, and even how like the side characters are pretty memorable. That's all great. It's just I felt like the main plot was just too straightforward. It's just like veteran man was mistreated. I feel like there's stories that do that, add a lot more depth to that. And also, maybe it doesn't help that the main villain just reminded me a lot of that mass shooter simulator game, Hatred.
I have no fear of death. It just means dreaming in silence.
My name is not important. What is important is what I'm going to do.
He just reminded me of the protagonist of that. Like, just, if you know what I'm talking about, you can't get that. I couldn't get that out of my head.
It's interesting choice of calling him the protagonist.
Those are my thoughts, I guess. Like, there's probably more deep in my brain, but that's the gist of it for me.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. It kind of, in some ways, kind of plays on the thing that a lot of like shonen anime movies kind of do, where it's just like, it's another adventure with these characters, but we have a higher animation budget kind of thing. Which, yeah, I would say that's pretty common with anime movies. So it's not guilty of that. All right, Ethan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I did really enjoy it. It definitely hits that good blend somewhere, between like one of the more serious Lupin specials and like Crusher Joe, or even like Pat Labor the movie, if you want to talk about like aesthesis and that sort of thing. I think on some level, I definitely agree. It does kind of suffer from that shonen movie thing, or like Lupin TV specials, where it very much feels sometimes just like an episode stretched out into a film. So there are some pacing issues, and I think the way they could have mitigated it, not to jump into the next question on the itinerary already, is I feel like Vincent and Elektra could have been developed a bit further if we'd spend a bit more time of our runtime with them. It could have been still very standalone, but stronger, and I feel like they could have better like counterpointed maybe like Spike's relationship in the main series, made it tie in a way that still makes it accessible. But even despite some of its deficiencies, like sometimes the pacing is a little bit lacking, overall I had a really good time with it. It was a very, very fun sort of adventure. Overall, like aside from again those very minor rough spots. It's got a really, not even really rough, just sort of draggy, I guess would be more apt. It's got a very good pace to it. The animation is of course gorgeous, particularly when you have the dogfight sequences, coming off Macross Plus, of course. The digital animation and CG is actually very well integrated overall. There's some neat camera movements and not a ton of CG elements, like you see in when the camera backs away in the train car, and again during some of the dogfight, you get a little bit of that, and it looks good. It integrates pretty well, and of course, it's just fun, a good time. Sort of a lame way to end, but
all right, Ed, what are your thoughts?
So this was I watched this again the second time for the podcast. The first time I watched it was when the dub was originally released, and that was like I think a couple of years after the show ended. So, like how Rein was saying, like if you're a fan of the show and you loved it, and at the end of it you were standing up cheering when you found out that like the movie was getting dubbed and you finally got a chance to get your hands on it, like the series was already over at that point. So it's like I had those rose-colored glasses, and I was just like, oh man, I miss you guys. Oh, well, that was the last thing I'm gonna get from you guys. Thanks. And then, but then watching it as an adult, it's a little different. It really dragged on a whole lot. I think out of all of the canonical villains of Bebop, Vincent is the worst, which kind of gets us to the next question. But he's like the worst. Like the guy from the first episode, who the druggy guy was his girlfriend who was pretending to be pregnant. Like they had more like character depth and development in their episode than Vincent and so like they were really the weakest part. I forgot how much they sexualized Faye, and she's such a great character. Like I love her like character of like how she's like just I don't know, like supernaturally unlucky, but like she keeps getting put into these situations and that's just her thing. But like I don't know, the part where the Vincent like takes her and like just kisses her and implies. I guess they implied that he. I don't know. And then he like cut her shirt off. I was like, that's so. I don't know. I think when I was a teenager, when I was younger, it was like, ooh, spicy. But like as an adult, I look back on that, and it's just so cringy. And it's like there was no reason to do that. Nothing in Vincent's character suggested. I mean, I guess they're just trying to show him off as being a disgusting villain, because like a lot of the things he did didn't make sense. He just like mindlessly did stuff, and that's I guess into it. But I don't know. I just think it's a detriment to Faye, especially because like I mean, I'm gonna move on from that. But this I think with talking about Faye again and all the characters, this is like a good snapshot of each one of the characters and like their strengths on the crew, and you see why they like hang out, and like I mean they all do things separately, but then they always come together in the end. That's like literally how every episode works. It's like they hear about a bounty, everyone goes off and figures it out on their own way. They all have their own style of investigating, and it feels very eclectic and chaotic. But then at the end, it's like they all come together to not get the bounty, but they all come together in the end to try and work together, and then like end up not doing it at all. I hated how this movie didn't really have a resolution. Vincent just didn't shoot because in the last, like, I think there was only like 10 seconds left for the movie. He like realized, oh, I know this girl, and then he just doesn't shoot, and then that's it. I don't know. It was just Vincent and which we'll talk about them in a minute. But other than that, I loved everything else. I think it did. The pacing was an issue. Everybody says that. Second time around, I think I fell asleep during the dogfight scene. On accident. I was like watching it overnight. I was tired, but it also didn't grab my attention that much. I mean, it was a cool scene. I was even thinking too. I was like, oh man, that looks really good. And then I wake up. So next thing I know, Spike and Vincent are fighting on top of the sign. I'm like, oh, well. But I mean, I've seen it before, so.
Yeah, I felt bad like not like liking the movie more when the dogfight was coming on, because I was like, man, this is so great, like the animation on display. But
yeah, I mean, it also looked really good too, but it was also like unnecessary, and I think that's what I was thinking too. I was like, why is the army randomly attacking Spike? It's not really explained.
Yeah.
I guess it's just because they're trigger happy. I mean, I think it might help if they was going for a scorched earth like method where they was like, anybody that's moving right now that's not at the parade, you need to kill them. Because that's what it said. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was unnecessary. There's no real reason, no rhyme or reason for why the army military just starts attacking Spike. I don't know. It looked really cool though.
Right. Yeah. All right, Joe, what are your thoughts?
I guess I'll definitely start out by saying, like, there was a lot, the animation and the visual direction were just like kind of carried the movie. I kind of understand like some of the more plot points were like not as solid, but I feel like the animation was always like just so fluid, and even just like the flow of action was always consistent. There was always something like going from one shot to another shot where it's like the edits almost carried over and kind of like really helped strengthen like the fight scenes. And I felt like a lot of that really, to me, I thought the movie was like edited. The pacing might have been overall not great, but for me, I felt like within the scenes, I thought the editing there was fine. I will say about the ending with Spike and Elektra and Vincent, we're gonna get into that in a second, but like I literally was like, what? Whenever he was like, I actually loved her in a past life, I was like, what the like it was a just moment that felt so like just kind of randomly thrown in. And I mean, I did go back and rewatch some of it and was like, oh, they do kind of foreshadow it a little bit in like the prison scene, but it just felt so kind of like thrown in there. It was like really, I don't really know what I think about it yet, but because I've only seen the movie like for the one time last night. Okay. But overall, I think my favorite part was like when Spike is just kind of walking around the city and kind of like looking for stuff, and you get to see all these little vignettes of him like asking people questions and kind of like these shots on the street. And I really think that is one of the reasons I love it. I like more kind of atmospheric films, and I really think it really was one of the best parts, and just kind of seeing that from Bebop, and I just love the tone and the atmosphere in general. And I think that's kind of a reason I just love 90s anime more than contemporary stuff, where it's like they kind of make that to the forefront versus modern day stuff where it's like, oh, the plot points are kind of the main thing. You can't deviate from the plot or you're gonna ruin the story. But I feel like now it's like really more insight into the characters and stuff. And I guess overall, it just felt like after seeing this, I haven't seen the series in like 4 years. It just kind of felt like nice to see these characters doing something else, in the original, than the original series. It kind of felt like, kind of how Disney wants people to feel with like the Star Wars movies, where it's like, oh, we're coming home to like these classic characters and stuff, and I was just like, oh man, this is super cool. But yeah, overall I would say I liked it, but I definitely think that there are some weaker things more in the plot, like plot points I think are a little bit weaker, but I definitely think that the characters and visuals kind of like help take us through the film, and I think it really worked for me. So yeah.
Awesome. I guess to start off my thoughts, I don't know if any of y'all have ever watched a top 10 anime films YouTube video, but they're all basically the same list. It's Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Perfect Blue, Paprika, 5 Ghibli films. Bonus points if any of those Ghibli films is not directed by Hayao Miyazaki. And then Cowboy Bebop the movie will usually end up on the list. And I wouldn't put it on my top 10, probably wouldn't put it on my top 20, but I like it. And I get why I get why it's that big with a lot of people, because for one thing, it has the association with this huge series that's just like very highly regarded. So it has that helping it, but then also it has a lot of aspects that it make it work well despite sort of the not great pacing, the dragging in the middle, other issues we'll get into a bit later, but the visuals are absolutely stunning. Like, it was made during that peak era of the like late 90s, early 2000s, where they just perfected cell animation, and we got stuff like Vampire Hunter D, Bloodlust, Spriggan, and this. It's one of those movies where just every frame looks like a painting that belongs in a museum. So it's just so gorgeous to look at. I always enjoy it on that aspect alone. And the fights were all a lot of fun. I particularly enjoy the fist fight at the end between Spike and Vicious. The animation in that is really good, and it's just this really intense brawl between the two of them, which made it very entertaining to engage with. But yeah, I would say its biggest issues are the pacing, and then Ed had kind of mentioned the weird assaulty stuff regarding Faye, which that's one of those things, like when you're kind of an edgy high schooler, it doesn't seem as out of place, but then when you watch it as an adult in the year 2021, it's kind of
when you're younger, you're like, oh, this is provocative, this is powerful, and then as you get older, it's like, well, yeah, just because it's
exactly,
you know. It kind of comes with a lot of my problems with the way Faye gets handled a lot, and I'm pretty sure that's not Watanabe's doing. I'm pretty sure it was studio meddling. Yeah. Because she's only there to be the damsel, and she gets put into these suggestive sexual positions and situations all the time. Like the first episode I saw was the one where they caught her and she's in the bathroom, and I'm pretty sure it's a super iconic scene where she has her hands hanging up like this. They have her hands like cuffed up, and she has her legs crossed. You know what I'm saying? Right. And it's like, it's a very like provocative pose, but if you take a step back and just watch her origin episode, like, she has a lot of heart, and she's like one of my favorite characters. And I don't know, I think it started off because I was a horny teenager, but when you learn about her, she's up there as one of my favorite female characters in anime, and I just hate how they treated her sometimes.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think in the series you get more of her kind of being like a badass, where in the movie you don't get as many moments of that. But yeah, and then another issue that I think it needs to be mentioned is there's a weird joke in that little Ed montage that is not only transphobic, a little pedophilic. It hasn't aged well. It's just not a good joke. But if you can get past this weird little moment, the rest of the movie, there's stuff to enjoy about it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
because I was thought about that too. I was like, so are you implying that if she was a little boy, then
there's no good answer to that one.
No.
Besides that, I do think that there's plenty to enjoy about the movie, and like Austin said, I think it's accessible. Unfortunately, not accessible in the way of like being able to watch it, because it was released on Blu-ray by Sony like a decade ago, and then when Funimation got the series, they eventually got the movie, but they did this just like really limited release of it. Which, like, I've heard that the limited release Blu-ray that they did of it is a very good Blu-ray release, but it was so limited that it was so hard to get your hands on, and now it's in the hundreds of dollars. It's definitely a shame that it's not as easy to come by these days, but I do think that it's one of those things where if you're interested in Bebop and you want to just kind of get a really visually stunning, just like 2-hour encapsulation of kind of what you can expect, this is not a bad place to start. So yeah, I guess moving on to the question, which I think it seems like, just based on the people who kind of already dipped into this question, it seems like there's going to be pretty much a consensus here, but let's just talk about the new characters that this movie added. Vincent Villaju and Electra Ovilo. So yeah, let's talk about how we feel about those characters.
I have like one point that I kind of was interested in. I didn't really look into like the deeper themology of the film, but it seemed like it alluded to Vincent almost being like a darker kind of version than Spike, kind of more like villain. Kind of like
a Spike vicious hybrid type thing.
Yeah.
I guess.
In the chat, I jokingly called this Cowboy Bebop, the Tree of Might, because he's Turles to Spike's Goku.
Hell yes.
I was just about to say, I thought they were going to bring up in the movie that Vincent looked like evil Spike. First thing I saw, when that guy came out, I was just like, oh, that's his dad. And I think it's cool, like a villain who thinks he's in purgatory is really good. Elektra's a really typical anime lady, because even though she's like a ruthless murderer, you just like catch her off guard once and she gets flustered like a high school girl. Neither of them are really like standout characters. I agree that they should have been fleshed out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only have like 1.5 points, I guess, about the villain. I guess the most positive thing that I'm going to say about him that any of us would have to say is I feel like he works decently as just like a physical threat,
for
like
sure,
in the action scenes and stuff. Like he is he's definitely like imposing, so he works on that level. It sounds like not so much any other level. I guess just to bring back the assault stuff one more time, like it's there, but like it doesn't. It feels like it should be like central to his character. Like it should like inform like it, but it doesn't seem to really, or if it does, it's not really brought up enough to warrant it.
I kind of got my thoughts out there, but one small thing was that I couldn't stop noticing was that Vincent shares a voice actor with Timmy Turner's dad from Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah, I was gonna bring him up actually. He's voiced by Darren Norris, who is also the like commander in Team America World Police.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he has a lot of like American voice roles outside of anime stuff, and I couldn't hear just Timmy. Like for the most part, you don't notice it. It's only on like certain lines, but I just couldn't help but hear Timmy Turner's dad doing a gravelly voice, doing his Dark Knight voice. But other than that, yeah, Elektra's kind of flat. I feel like there's something interesting there, but we never really get to see it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and sort of the same with Vincent.
Yeah. So recently I went through like the work of David Lynch and I watched Mulholland Drive, and I kind of have this like wonder if there's a viewing of this, because they talk about dreams a lot, that this almost is kind of like a dream perception of what Spike is going through, and like Vincent and Elektra are almost like his internal thoughts like personified as characters, almost in like a way like kind of foreshadowing almost the real folk blues like finale.
It's all a dream.
Which I really want to like go in rewatch it a couple times to go into this more, but I really just, it's after seeing Mulholland Drive and like analyzing it, I kind of have this thing where I'm like, okay, if dreams are involved, I kind of watch it through like this filter, you know, where it's like characters and like the entire film is just the personification of like people's sort of like subconscious thoughts and stuff. So that's kind of all I had to say about that. But I don't know. I'm gonna.
Joe, I don't have time to rewatch this movie. Don't try and bring up interesting things.
He already wrote it off.
I think that's an interesting take. I guess my opinion on them is that they kind of have that like filler character syndrome, where they're kind of just aesthetically interesting and not super interesting on any level really deeper than that. And like Rein said, I think Vincent works as an imposing force that kind of makes him interesting. But I think Bebop has more interesting imposing forces like Vicious and Piero LaFoe. I think they have some cool moments, but they should have been fleshed out a little bit more. But yeah, moving on to the last real big question, which is the soundtrack. And Bebop is a series that is very well known for having very good music, which was a series composed by composer Yoko Kanno. And if you don't know that name, you probably don't watch anime. She's one of the biggest composers in anime. She always composes a very compelling score. She has so much great work in her background, like Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, Escaflowne, Wolf's Reign. There's so many incredible scores that she's done, and she absolutely brings it to Bebop as well. And the movie brings her back, and she brings back some of the contributing artists that she worked with in the series, such as Mai Yamane and the Seatbelts and some others. So what are your thoughts on the movie's soundtrack, Austin?
There's this line in the beginning where Spike is walking around town trying to get info, and the song just says, "Maybe I'm just dumb and horny," and it was like really aughts. The moment was very 2000 aughts. The other big standout about the soundtrack is there's this track called Powder, where people like the sort of operatic chanting, and you knew was hitting the fan when Powder came on. Like, the room is 3D now, and there's butterflies. It happens a few times in the movie, and it reminds me of the sort of one-shot Mr. Robot episode where they played Knee Play 3 off Einstein on the beach just to scare the out of you. It got real when Powder was on. I guess Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts are sort of like they're on that level with like the Pillows for Fooly Cooley. Mm-hmm. They did really solid work, and I would dare to say that Yoko Kanno's work is more diverse.
Yeah, awesome. Rein.
I couldn't imagine this film without the soundtrack. Like, it gives it so much identity. So that's my 2 cents.
Ethan.
Yeah, no, this was a very, very good score from Kanno, very eclectic. I know her primarily for Macross Plus and Tourney Gundam, which are both very good, but a bit more straightforwardly orchestral throughout, or a little bit more, in turn A, more straightforwardly orchestral, a bit more straightforwardly like synthetic for Macross Plus. Good blending of those elements. Here, you can definitely see her calling on like a lot of different, cultural influences and that sort of thing. That sort of reflects the setting in a really interesting way. Overall, just really outstanding work throughout. It sets the stage in a way that's very unique and complements the visuals so spectacularly, while also functioning as really good music on its own, which is about the best thing you can ask for out of a soundtrack. Overall, just really great stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Ed.
So if I were to count up from 3, like do like a count up from like the top 3 things that make Cowboy Bebop iconic, number 3 would be the English voice acting cast. Mm-hmm. Number 2 will be Watanabe, and number 3 will be Kanno soundtrack. Mm-hmm. Like, it's what drove. It's like, I think like Faye, like I said earlier, Faye kind of hooked me in, or kind of like reeled me in, but what made me stay was the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. I have the original Cowboy Bebop soundtrack on my phone that I like. It's in my playlist that I listen to all the time. When I was listening to this, I was like, dang, the movie soundtrack's pretty good too. I'm like, I'm gonna have to add that to it too. Like, I never really thought about it, but the music is just so good. It's how it gets integrated. The last thing I watched from Watanabe was Current Tuesday, mm-hmm. which is like, I think that's like him coming full circle in his like series creation of like just making a whole music series. And I don't think Kanno was in that, but he does music so well. He incorporates it so well in the scenes. Mm-hmm. Like, literally, like if you go back into the Wayback Machine to the era of the AMV on YouTube era, these scenes with these songs could be really good AMVs, like the dogfight scene and the music playing there, all the fight scenes, the low moments when the characters are walking down the streets. It just doesn't stop. It only stops to like have dialogue, which but it's the music's really good. It's a high point in the movie. Always a high point in the series. And every time she's involved, I'm listening. So
absolutely, yeah. Joe.
This was a banging soundtrack. every song on there Just straight bangers. I think it was a lot different from the original series, like in a lot of terms, that the original series kind of has this more kind of blues inspired stuff, and it's kind of mainly focused on that. But I think this had a lot more diverse like genres of music involved, a lot more cinematic. I love Powder. I think it was my favorite like song from the movie, and I think it was very akin. It reminded me a lot of like Ghost in the Shell, kind of like the opening scene with all like the chanting and stuff. Yeah, overall, it just like really, it felt like a more kind of a natural evolution of like the series soundtrack of like for where that came from. And honestly, it was just amazing.
Yeah,
it's just great.
Yeah, I think you definitely nail it on the head there with it being sort of an evolution of the series soundtrack. It definitely feels like it's bringing the same kind of notes as the series soundtrack, but it's stepping its game up just a little bit. It's like, this is the movie, this has to be just a little bit more, and I think it delivers absolutely. And like you were saying, the kind of diversity, the more like cultural stuff adds to sort of the atmosphere of the film as well, and it helps with these little vignettes of people going around and asking people things in these different places, and it makes for some really neat montages. It really helps in that regard. Yeah, I guess that's about all I'd have to say about that. So just for our final little note, this past week we got some photos for the new upcoming live-action Cowboy Bebop series coming to Netflix. It features John Cho as Spike and Mustafa Shakir as Jet, Daniela Pineda as Faye, and a Corgi as I. So, we got some photos of them in their set costumes, and it kind of sparked some conversation online. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I have very quick thoughts.
Yeah, Rein, go ahead.
Everything looks great except like John. What was
John
the
Cho.
Spike's actor?
John Cho.
Pretty solid actor from what I've seen, but man, I feel like what everyone says is he seems a good decade or two too old for the role.
That's fair.
It should have been Andrew Koji. When I saw that John Cho was getting the role, I was like, oh, that's fine. He's a good actor. But then I saw Warrior, and I was introduced to Andrew Koji, and I was like, why isn't he Spike? Go back in time. He needs to be Spike. He looks like the guy that Spike is based off of too. Like, it's crazy. My mind is blown. Like, I think we need to push the reset button. John Cho's fine, but I think that's a missed opportunity. And that's all I want to say about that. I'm gonna watch it. I love Cowboy Bebop. As long as they have the same director and music, I'm fine.
All right, Austin.
It all comes down to money. If they spend a lot of money on it, it'll probably be worth watching. That's my Netflix thing. I don't know.
That's fair. Ethan?
It looks fine. It'll probably be kind of fun, something different. It will not serve as a replacement for the anime, and it probably won't do things quite as well. Just nature of the beast. Just because it's the first thing most people have seen. It'll always sort of that's sort of the tragedy of them not just making their own science fiction show with space mercenaries, space bounty hunters. Now it'll just always sort of forcibly be compared to Bebop, the original Bebop, and people kind of. And it sort of constrains the lore in a way, its own sort of universe. But I mean, it'll probably still be fun and good and cool. It looks fine.
Yeah. And Joe.
I'm really impressed from like a visual standpoint. I think just a lot of anime adaptations are just a far cry from their source material, like Dragon Ball Evolution and like the 2017. Was it 2017 Death Note? Has it been that long? Holy. But yeah, like I'm really impressed with the costumes and the production design in general. But I'm still kind of like a little cautious because I don't know if it's going to have the same tone as the original series. Like the Cowboy Bebop to me is like a show that is serious at some points, but also has these really bizarre and kind of wacky moments to kind of like, and the characters feel kind of charming, and I'm worried that they're gonna kind of take this in like a Punisher, Daredevil kind of perspective where they're gonna just make it really kind of gritty and stuff, and kind of not really introduce some of like the more fun sides of the series. Also, I have a question. Does anybody really know who the showrunner of this is? Because
I Andre Nemec is who's developing it. He wrote the screenplay for Ghost Protocol and hasn't done much else very attractive. He worked on Alias back in the day.
Gotcha. I don't know. So I think in general, it's going to be a thing. If it gets more people interested in the old show, then I think it's done its job. But
yeah,
besides that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty much my feelings on it. Is I hope that it brings more people to the original series, and I hope it's cool enough. I think it'll probably be fine if it's a fun enough show. I'll watch it. I'll definitely at least give it like the 3 episode test to see if it's at least worth watching all the way through or just stop. Yeah, hopefully it's a fun enough show. Hopefully it's interesting. I guess that pretty much does it for us. Any departing thoughts?
I will say that I have 2 anime that I count as like perfect. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and then this. They're just perfect anime. So
fair enough. Yeah, I guess that'll do it for us. Ed and Joe, thank you both for coming on to the podcast. If you have anything you want to promote.
I guess just like I'll drop my website here probably. So if you want to, I am a editor / colorist in the St. Louis area. So if you guys want to like work together on anything, just hit me up. I'll put my website in the description. All right. Thanks for having me again.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. And thank you for watching this podcast. If you are listening on any of the audio platforms, go ahead and leave a review because it helps boost us in the algorithms. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. Go ahead and give a like if you like the video. Go ahead and give a subscribe if you want to watch more of our videos. And hit the bell icon because YouTube decided that subscribing wasn't enough. Tune in next week when we talk about the new Candyman remake. And that'll just about do it for us today. We are signing off. Thank you for tuning in to the Bomb Squad podcast. And remember, you're going to carry that weight. See you, Space Cowboy.
I just slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."